One of the biggest wargaming conventions is rapidly approaching, the Nova Open in Washington, D.C., and we're gonna be there trench crusading it up. We've been putting together some warbands. I have one warband complete, and that is the Catacomb Sappers, the staunch defenders of the Catacombs of the Blessed Dead. And I'm working on another faction because I need a bad guy faction too, and that is the Grace of Flesh. But I'm not alone. Nick is also putting together a warband, and what are you working on?
I'm working on the Cult of the Black Grail, and it's probably the coolest faction in Trench Crusade.
I like the Beelzebub guy.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
He's chubby.
Yep. Oh yeah.
All right, so are you ready to get started?
No, because I have to 3D print the rest of my models.
Oh.
So I'm gonna do that right now.
Well, we'll see what I can get done in the meantime. While Nick is doing that, I have plenty of work ahead of me. The Grace of Flesh are our minis. These are 3D printed prototypes, but for our campaign, they're gonna be available as resin cast miniatures. The Vainglorious Beasts, the 3 little piggies, complete with ranged weapons and monstrous faces. These guys are consistently vicious, but a little unpredictable. But as demons, I feel like that's exactly right. My next mini is the real MVP of this force, the Hauteur Champion. By proxy Hell Knight, this guy is large and in charge. Well, not technically in charge, but as the one guy with a machine gun, he's bringing the heat. And of course, Princeps Agaris, the Praetor. This guy is monstrous. Very hard to kill and even harder to down. This guy is a tank. These minis are available in our GameFound campaign, The Catacombs of the Blessed Dead, and were sculpted by the incredibly talented Eugenia Suarez. We were inspired by the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpents from Trench Crusade, and these were designed by our artist Lauren. These models are large and in charge, and they stand on some really big bases. And speaking of those bases, I want to build bases to match the Catacombs of the Blessed Dead. I started out taking some 1/8 inch cork and laying it down for a foundation, using my Dremel tool to make the surface uneven. Now for some popsicle sticks. I used these on the board to make some flooring, and these bases are big enough that I can keep the style going. I super glued down some sticks that I pre-cut into the right shapes and then made up some milliput. I globbed this on over the bases to build up some earth that is piled up, and then I rolled out the rest of the putty flat and left it a bit to firm up. Then I started to cut out some bricks. The almost dry milliput is really easy to carve, and I made up a bunch of these bricks using my hobby knife to weather the edges and corners. Then I glued them down in little piles, making sure there was room for my mini's feet. It's time for my texture. I took some texture paste and smeared it everywhere. Over the bases and getting one thick coat on, and then using a clean brush to wipe away from the details, letting it build up around the edges and around the bricks. Now, no catacomb is complete without skulls. I grabbed my Citadel Skulls box and started clipping out some heads. I glued these down here and there over the bases, using some thick super glue to stick them down. Then I used some more texture paste to blend them in like they've been sitting here a while, or for centuries. Now I can attach my bad boys, everyone except for the Princep. He's so big, I think I'll leave him off the base to make painting a little bit easier. I stuck down everyone to the paint handles, and then I made a double wide handle for the Princep, and now everyone is ready for some paint. It sure taken Nick a long time to finish 3D printing his guys, so I think I'll get started without him. After a black prime, I grabbed the beasts and got started taking a dark red and doing many little lines on their fat rolls, starting to create some disgusting complexion. After a dark red, I did the same thing with a brighter red, doing fewer lines and really focusing on coating their faces. Then I mixed some off-white into the red and did another smaller layer. Now I'm working with almost pure off-white, and I put a little bit of this onto their jowls, but mostly I covered the shapes in their faces. Like their skulls are open to the air with just a little bit of fat and muscle for protection. These are some nasty looking piggies. With faces done, I now moved on to their backs, using all the same colors to sketch in their rippling muscles. I sketched in some highlights and then used some thinned down dark red and glazed this over spots, darkening the colors and making them a little more saturated. Now as I move away from their faces, I want these colors to shift, from bloody red to an actual dark piggy skin. I started by base coating all the remaining flesh with a dark green. Then I took a gray paint and highlighted the volumes of their muscles, switching to a lighter blue-gray. This cold color will stand out nice and strong next to the red, and I did a final highlight with an almost white paint. Now their arms are looking a little like non-metallic metal. To get these parts fleshy, I glazed the same dark red thinned down over these areas to tint them and to warm them to a purpley color. These guys are weird. I wonder how Nick is doing.
One problem I found with the warband I wanted is, the Plague Knight is really cool, but there's only one model, and I want two, so I had to get creative. I popped the Knight into Blender where I cut the end off the weapon and swapped it with a different one. This is the same decoration that Sean has on his Heretic Priest. And then I flipped it to make this guy a little bit more different. After printing it, it's pretty convincingly a different guy. All right, I got them all printed. Ooh. And I even digitally kit bashed one of them too, so. My favorite Black Grail minis are the mosquito-looking guys. The Plague Knight guys, obviously, and then I have two more Skeetos in the Hounds of the Black Grail. These are super fast infantry. And the coolest model in Trench Crusade, the Herald of Beelzebub. Somehow this guy can actually fly with those wings. All of this is 500 points of Black Grail. A good starter force.
Well, while you were doing that, I finished about 75% of the vainglorious beasts, the pig boys.
And how long did these take?
About 10 hours to get them here.
10 hours. I don't think I have 10 hours.
Well, I think with the right amount of speed paint, we could get the whole shebang done in about that time.
We prepped some cobalt key bases for the models I want, and I wanted to make a disgusting wonderland for the environment, and to do this, it's going to take a lot of super glue. I put down some little piles of sand using ultra-thin super glue to permanently attach these piles down to the base. Then I stole some of Jay's skulls and put those all over the base. These are just decorations for the ground. Next, I put Elmer's glue all over the bases using a brush to lay down a thin, uneven layer and then dripped ultra-thin super glue all over the glue. I don't know why, but this makes the glue turn into a wrinkly mess, and it's very gross. And messy. Putting on this much super glue at once, I accidentally dripped it all over my hands, gluing my fingers together. It is very easy to get your fingers stuck. I think I glued my fingers to every base, but eventually everything was perfect. And then I used a sanding twig to clean up the base rims. Now my models are ready for painting. Jay let me borrow his horribly dirty airbrush and his ancient white primer. And it was an absolute mess trying to get these guys primed, but eventually they were all white. Everyone leave a comment shaming Jay about how dirty his airbrushes are. After white prime, Jay helped me pick out some colors. I want really bright and gross minis. So for the knights and dogs, I base coated them with a sickly brown color, and then for the Fly Lord, I base coated him with a desaturated blue color. Then everyone got a Zenithal with a white yellow color. This brightens and builds up volumes. And then to finish the base coats, everyone got a little bit of white ink directly from above. This very quickly got some colors onto everyone. Now to start knocking these models out. Unlike Jay, I'm going for speed, and I bet these guys are pretty forgiving, with all their fat rolls and blisters. Over the top of these colors, I varnished everyone with a satin varnish in preparation for the Plague Knights. This speed paint, Noble Skin, is a really good black with a little bit of brown in it. I put this all over him, rushing to get the paint everywhere, so it's all wet and has time to settle into the recesses. And I pulled it away from the raised areas. Now that the knights are dark, it's time to give them some metal. First, a dry brushing with the dark metal everywhere, and now some rust. Dirty down rust. I've never used this stuff before, and it smells weird. I put this all over in patches over his armor and weapons, and then when it was dry, I hit it again with the silver dry brushing. They look good, but I just noticed their capes are actually wings. Or wing-like capes. I gave these another puff of white through the airbrush to brighten these up, and the knights are done. Well, almost done. Everyone is going to get some blood, but that will be a project for later. Now, onto the hounds. I gave them a wash of an ugly brown color, then some sickly chartreuse on their legs and their sores. After that, I put some watered down red all over their faces, shoulders, and their huge... I don't know what that is. Leave a comment if you know what that is. To make these spots even grosser, I brushed some blood red speed paint all over the sack and the face. This got very red very quickly. Maybe a little too red. More white ink through the airbrush to de-red these bits, spraying the shoulders and sack, turning the model around and spraying between the legs. I put a varnish over top these spots so I can keep going back in with the speed paints. I took a dark red paint and tried to paint some little veins running up their bellies. I haven't done much freehanding, but after a few tries I got the hang of it. Then I put a very watered down yellow speed paint over their bellies to tint the white a more disgusting flesh color.
5 hours in, got the Plague Knights done, got the hounds pretty much done. I mean, I feel like it's gonna be no sweat.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I'm really happy with the Plague Knight.
That dirty down rust.
It works.
50% of the time, it works every time. Really only one guy left, and that is to finish up Plague Boy.
Yeah. Herald of Beelzebub.
Herald of Beelzebub. He looks like the monster from The Fly. The Goldblum one.
He is a fly. Like a super fly. Now the dogs are ready for blood. But not yet. There's still one guy left. Fly Lord. To get this guy the right complexion, I thinned down some dark red and blue speed paints and put this all over the skin. Blue everywhere, and then red in his pits and folds. This guy is so gross, he has a special rule where every action taken within 8 inches of this guy is a risky action. I guess it's to represent trying to hold your breath around him so you don't breathe in the stink. In a few spots, I put a full strength dark red around his gizzard and the deepest fat folds. Once that was dry, I airbrushed some more white directly from above to brighten him up a little. Now for his weapon. I put some of the brown black speed paint all over his gun and some black speed paint over his eyes. Trying something out in the eyes, the texture is too subtle to put on with a brush. So I put some paint onto a tiny piece of scrap foam and rubbed this on. This worked pretty good. After one wipe of gray, I did another wipe with white paint to make his compound eye look shiny. After the eyes, I covered his gun in 2 thin coats of dirty down, and then gave his weapon a dry brush of silver. That's the Herald done. And everyone done. Only a few things left to do. On the bases, I smeared some brown and green all over the ground, and then I washed it with the dark ugly green color. My minis turned out bright, so dark bases will look good. Now the team is finally ready for some blood. But not just some splatter, some drips. I don't know why, but I own a fishing line, and I can do some pretty cool stuff with this. but I need Jay's help to get this right. To get this to look like dripping blood, we'll need to use some UV cure resin. Jay pulled the fishing light tight against the round pliers, while I hit it with a heat gun to melt it, and to get it to hold its shape. This will make a round strand of clear plastic. Jay dipped the ends in UV resin and held it right under his proboscis. When it was in the right spot, I hit it with a UV lamp to cure the resin, locking it down. Now that it's stuck there, Jay used a toothpick to drip some more resin over the fishing line. And after a few seconds under the lamp, it was hardened. That's a nice round drip. Now for a big drip. Jay held a short length of fishing line up to the tip of his nose. And then when it was in the right spot, I hit it with a UV lamp. This is a 3-hand operation, but it really works. A little more UV resin, and now I have some crystal clear liquid effects on my guys. The second plague knight got a long drip on his nose and another drip off his staff. The herald got a few drippies, one from his nose and one dripping out of his gun. There is another way to make some stickly strands, and that is Uhu glue. I put this onto a playing card and then used a toothpick to transfer the stringy glue onto the plague knight's topper. Sean did the same thing with his heretic priest, and I really like the look. Now that the effects are there, they need to be painted. I took some blood for the blood god technical paint and brushed it all over the clear effects. This paint is transparent, so it'll turn these bits into transparent red. I put some extra blood over their noses and the dog's sacks. I really like how these turned out. It adds a lot. Now just a few finishing touches, like black paint on the Flylord's toenails, and then hitting the base rims with the black paint.
The Skeeter squad is all done?
Yeah.
This morning, how confident were you that they were all gonna get done today?
I was not confident at all. If I had to do this all by myself without you helping me, it would have taken days.
It only took about 8-ish hours?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Just about that.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
You finished all the Skeeters. I finished, very nearly finished, the Pig Boys.
Yeah, they look really good.
I like the Pig Boys. I'm gonna have to do some of the same blood stringies in their faces.
Oh yeah, that'd be good.
So now you're gonna help me with the rest of these guys?
Yeah.
While Nick was painting his Plague Boys, I was helping him with steps and color suggestions while finishing up my piglets. The guns in my piggies are fantasy revolver muskets. They won't get to shoot these often, my pigs prefer to punch, but it's nice to have the option. I started by giving them a base coat with an earth brown, and then I took some off-white paint and started sketching on some fine lines to start a wood grain. I did another layer of brighter, finer lines, and then I base coated all the metal in gray. Then I took a dark brown paint and glazed this over everything as a wash to darken the wood and shade the metal. Now onto some highlights. I worked up through a few shades of gray, getting lots of contrast between the brightest and darkest spots to make the metal look glossy. On the bayonets, I painted up some non-metallic metal reflections, working up to tiny dots of pure white. Looking at the guns, they're nice and pretty, but a little bit too pretty. I took some orange paint, thinned it way down, then glazed this into the cracks and crevices of the guns to get them perfect. This took a little bit longer than speed paint and dry brushing, but I want these minis to look really good. We've been working so hard designing and inventing these minis, I want them to match the concept art perfectly. And speaking of that art, their big old tummy corsets need some non-metallic metal. For these, I think starting with a blue will give me the look I'm after. I painted everything in a dark blue and then switched to a bright turquoise and sketched it on, following the shapes and lines of their armor. Once that was on, I took an off-white and put this over top, doing the same highlighting pattern, just less of them. This looks a little bit crazy, but it won't after a little bit. I took the yucky green color that Nick used to base coat his boys and glazed this super watered down over all the armor. This darkens everything and modifies my colors. Then I took a desaturated blue-gray and glazed this over the top part of the armor. This lets a little bit of those intense base coats shine through, but softens and blends the transitions. And speaking of softening those transitions, I used some watered down black paint to darken the recesses, glazing this over the lower parts of their armor. This made for armor with a lot of color in it, and I finished it off with just a few swipes of off-white for the brightest highlights. I really like how this looks. Now my piggies are nearly done, just a few more little things, like their little loincloths that I hit with some dark pinks. And of course, I can't forget about their little tushies. I used my reds and grays for their butts and legs, continuing the flesh tones down their bodies. Now for those mohawks, I rebase coated these in black and then threw a dark watery red over their mouths. Then I dry brushing a gray and light gray to catch in all the peaks in the hair. With the paint job done, I sealed in all the flavors with some satin varnish, and now for some blood, some more Uhu glue. I put this onto a toothpick and stretched it over the quadrants in their heads, like there's some gore being stretched in all directions. Once that was on there, I used some blood for the blood god to tint it red, and my piggy boys are done. The 3 little piggies are done, and they only took me about twice as long as it took Nick to paint his whole army, but that's fine because I'm taking my time. There's definitely a joy to finishing models quickly. Some of my favorite Warhammer memories are buying a box of Warhammer, bringing it home, and then that day finishing it, and then can throw away the box, can throw away the instructions because I don't need them anymore. I found the prize inside. With these guys, it has been such an endeavor to actually get them physically made. I can afford to spend a little bit of extra time on them. And now with the piggies done, it is time for their hero, the Auteur champion. This model and all of these minis were designed by our artist Lauren, and when she showed us the concept art for a knight holding a Stig machine gun, we all died laughing, and we knew we had something special. The Hell Knight is the only model in my warband that is actually trying to be tactical. He's tough, shoots good, fights good, and doesn't mess around. I think I'll activate him last, so he can try and mop up the mess my princeps and piggies caused during the turn. I started off giving him a dark coat of purple everywhere, and then I want to paint his armor exactly like I did on the piggies. I still have all those colors on my palette, although there are some big differences between the different looks of my units. Keeping the colors consistent will do a lot to make them look like they belong together. Like demons who all crawled out of the same Hellgate. I painted him up to a perfect ice blue knight and then slobbered on browns, grays, and black to tint him down to a dark, evil looking knight. I think this is my biggest non-metallic metal model I've ever painted. One final layer of off-white highlights on the shiniest spots of his armor, and I painted on some super thin scratches. Now that the armor is done, I can knock out the other few details on this sucker, like his royal cape. I started out with a base coat of a dark red, and I also threw this onto his helmet plume. Then I sponged a bright saturated red on to give the cape a velvet look. I mixed some black into the red and glazed this into the recesses to darken the cape, and then I did some thinner lines of a black paint. On the peaks of the cloth, I edge highlighted with a bright red and the cape is done. Now onto that plume. I mixed some black into the dark red to make a shade and some off-white to make a highlight color, and I started painting up the plume using long thin lines on top to make it look like some magical hair that is somehow flapping in the non-existent catacombs breeze. Next up, that unicorn skull. It's a sin to kill a unicorn, and it's even worse to wear it on your shoulder. I base coated it in an earthy tan color and then highlighted up to an off-white paint. It was a lot of fun laying in some crispy highlights on the unicorn horn. Now onto the gun. I base coated this in black and painted on some gray streaks over the receiver. Then I did a wood grain on the gun stock just like on the piggies. I then very carefully highlighted with a gray and a light gray, making big jumps in value to make this weapon look dark and glossy. This weapon is the Serpent Assault Gun. It shoots Hellgas bullets, and you can shoot at 2 different targets instead of 1. With the gun done, the O-Tour champion is done, and now it's time for the Princept. One more model down and only one more to go. The ringleader of my whole shebang, Princeps Agaris. Now, this last model is a really big model, but sometimes models can be deceiving. The Ho-Tour champion took a little less time than the piggies, so who knows? I might be gaming pretty darn soon. Or it'll take forever. We'll see. I started out throwing a dark purple base coat over his fur and a dark red over his wings, working quickly to blend these two colors a little in the middle. This guy is so big I can use the airbrush. I sprayed a blue that I used to highlight my piggy's armor over the fur, making some bright spots on his legs and second arms. Then I took the blue-gray from my palette and started painting on tiny lines, running in the same direction as the fur. This will be step 1, and I did another layer of this color mixed with an off-white, and then I did another layer of pure off-white. This was looking good, but a little bit too bright. I watered down a dark wash and threw this over everything, and I put a little bit more dark purple in the lowest spots. Then I came back in with my off-white color and reapplied my brightest highlights. Now the furry body is done, it's time for those wings. I don't know how much flapping he's doing. I think the powers of hell just levitate him into the air. I took a bright red and dry brushed over these shapes, catching on the intense textures of the flesh. Then I glazed more purple on the lower half to get a gradient going. Then more dry brushing of a red, and then some red mixed with off-white. A second layer of a brighter off-white, and then a few swipes of pure off-white on the highest peaks, and on the front of what could be described as a face. Now his fleshy bits are done, it's time for his skin. I want some nice healthy looking skin. I started with a bright saturated red beige. Then I mixed in more and more off-white to highlight up until I was painting with pure off-white. Then I went back in with my first base coat color and glazed this over the layers I made. This is a lot like the non-metallic metal I did on the other guys, just trying to be smooth and clean instead of rough and metallic. Now onto his jewelry, and he's got a lot of it. I started by base coating in a yellow tan, carefully picking out every little bit and making sure not to spill on any of the finished bits. I also painted the weapons in gold. Then painted on some non-metallic metal using a dark orange for the shadows and an off-white with yellow glazing for the highlights. This weapon is the Head Taker. It's better at striking guys who haven't activated yet. I used these same colors on all the jewelry, and I painted black over the shaft of the weapon. Each side of this weapon represents a different Head Taker. He can get an extra punch with this weapon just in case he doesn't finish off Nick's guys with one swing. Now I can move on to the teeth of his wings. Only the best wings have teeth. I base coated these with an earth color, then I painted on stripes of an off-white, and then stripes of tan. His wings have an excellent dentist. I've come a long way on Princeps Agaris. This is a very chimeric creature with a lot of really weird textures. Big shaggy white fur, perfect skin. I don't even know what is going on with those wings, but this guy has been a lot of fun.
Are you done yet?
I'm almost done.
It's been days.
I'm almost done. Just gotta do the crocodile tail.
What about the bases?
And the bases. For the crocodile tail, I started out doing the same highlights I've been doing for non-metallic metal and then glazed dark purple over top to blend the highlights into the base coats. And now it's time for those bases. I want to make my bases look just like the catacombs, so I started off glazing an earth brown. I did 2 coats of this to get decent coverage over the black prime, and then I dry brushed a yellow white, hitting on all the details like the wooden planks, skulls, and bricks. Then I did a final dry brushing of some white paint, focusing on the edges and the skulls. This dry brush texture will look really different next to the layers on the mini, making them really pop. And speaking of popping, I'm finally painting the base frames black and I can pop off the painting desk to do some gaming. The Grace of Flesh, and boy are these guys fleshy. Except Hotur Champion, although at one point he did kill a unicorn, much like Lord Voldemort. These guys took a smidge longer for me to paint than Nick took painting his guys, but speaking of those guys, these guys gotta go join those guys.
I'm very happy with these minis, for the amount of time it took versus how these guys look. I have a habit of taking a simple paint job and making it way too many steps, and it never turns out. But with Jay's help, I am completely satisfied. The blood drips look so good, and it really ties the squad all together. And the flipped Plague Knight turned out really good. It's not too obvious it's the same guy twice.
The Grace of Flesh is standing in for the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent. I've already played some games with these guys, unpainted, and my first game, I beat Sean. Now I have to face off against Nick's Plague Boys and I'll beat him too. Trench Crusade is kinda my game. The Grace of Flesh turned out incredible. From photo collages, to sketches, to concept art, to low poly minis, to finished STLs, to resin cast minis. It has been a journey, but I never stop believing in these minis. These forces will be battling it out in our first ever campaign, the Catacombs of the Blessed Dead, which is live as of 10:30 a.m. CDT today. A collaboration between Eons of Battle and Trench Crusade. An official set of terrain to create a labyrinth of deadly corridors and claustrophobic hallways studded with the bones of the blessed men and women who have fallen in holy war. Our campaign includes terrain and our own miniatures, the Catacomb Sappers and the Grace of Flesh. Available as resin cast miniatures and as STLs for folks with a 3D printer. You can find the campaign linked in the description.